all for being here tonight, because it's been a really beautiful day, and to sit indoors to be part of this is fantastic. I hope you enjoyed it, and I also hope that it actually gave people some thoughts on and ideas, and in terms of how disability can be kind of brought more to the forefront within the Green Party. And I just wanted to say a bit that we can use this film, even though it's about America, we can use this film as a stepping stone onto looking into what how we can go forward in the country, because historically we actually kind of followed a lot of what happened on the film Crip Camp. So I'm one of the people that was really in the forefront in the 80s, I think that's about right, Ellen, is that was Baroness Jane Campbell, who's actually a cross-party member in the House of Lords, and she's in the House of Lords because of the work that she's done over the decades in terms of disability rights. So yeah, I mean, I just hope that we can get some really good conversation today, and we've got some great speakers here. So I'm going to move away and introduce you to Claudine, who is from the Greens of Colour, as this event today is being hosted by the Green Party Disability Greens and Greens of Colour. So thank you, Claudine, for coming today.
Thank you so much. I mean, a really pivotal documentary on fundamental rights for disabled people that really brings forth the challenges we face in the era of COVID and the COVID Act that has actually been brought forward. The rights that have been gained over the last, I would say probably 60 odd years seems to be really just being trampled over in a year. So it is so key and pivotal for us to really focus our minds on how the biggest minority, really, the disabled people, have been actually treated over this time. So I hope this really brings us back to protecting rights, to observe them, to be good allies, and ensure that we really are fighting to really protect and preserve the rights. And where convention rights have been breached by our government, I think it's important for us to look to actually redress those. I'm so grateful to be here, really, to have been invited to host with Dzaier, who has been fundamental in putting forward motions and actually making accessibility a key feature in our party. So I'm grateful for that. As a GPEX coordinator, as well as a Greens of Colour member, committee member, I am grateful to actually be here. And I'm looking forward to actually the discussions that we'll be having, and how do we actually move forward to actually bring those rights, protect them, and ensure that they are enforced. Thank you so much. We will now give time for the questions that we have received, and that will be putting this back to Dzaier, maybe to introduce our guests.
Okay, thank you, Claudine. Okay, so just a little thing for you. Today, 1 in 5%, 18% of working age adults have a disability. Crip Camp is one disability community story. There are thousands of stories around disability and discrimination, and these have been led by disabled people. Ethnicity, gender, class backgrounds, and more. The issues affect many of us, whether directly or indirectly. So before we have our esteemed guests, Mary Ellen Archer, Ellen Clifford, and Kate Belmonte, I just want to give you a little bit of housekeeping. So if you're somebody that has, if you can put questions into the chat, but if that's a difficulty for you, then if you go on to participants, and then you're actually going to be able to put your hands up on the participations, and you'll be unmuted so that you can actually ask your question. We're actually going to have 30 minutes of preset questions that have been put to our guests, and they will give some, the answers and their views to the questions that have been asked. They're also in different sections. So the first section is the need, problems and solutions. The second section will be on deeper understanding, and then the last section will be solutions and implementations. So and please, put your views, etc., in the chat, and I'd like to welcome you all again for being here. So Mary Ellen, just a little bit. Mary Ellen is from the Green Party, and she's also on the steering group of DPAC. We've got Ellen Clifford, who has written the fantastic book War on Disabled People, and the catastrophe that has had on us as a community. And Kate Belmonte, who's from Medway Green Party. And I'd firstly like to thank them for coming to this this event. So actually the first question, if you're ready, Ellen, is to you, and if you could just all introduce yourselves a little bit about what you've been doing and what where you come from and stuff. So I'll start with you, Ellen. So you've got 2 to 3 minutes. Just give yourself a pen picture to our audience.
Well, just to apologise for disappearing there. My internet just completely disappeared. I had to reboot the whole thing. That's a bit scary. So, all right, yeah, I'm Ellen Clifford. I'm a disabled activist. I've been involved in the disability sector for about the last 20 plus years. I've worked in the sector as well in a variety of roles, mainly within disabled people's user-led organisations and doing service user involvement and engagement, where I wasn't in an organisation led and controlled by deaf and disabled people. And since 2011, I've been involved with Disabled People Against Cuts, which was a campaign that was set up in 2010, actually, just before I got involved, to campaign against the disproportionate impacts of austerity and welfare reform on disabled people. I am currently co-chair of something called the Commission on Social Security, which is a very grand sounding name. It's an initiative funded by Trust for London, and it's led by benefit claimants developing proposals for a future much better social security system. And there's a website literally called Commission on Social Security.org if anyone's interested. And last year I had a book come out published by Zed Books called The War on Disabled People, Capitalism, Welfare and the Making of a Human Catastrophe.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Mary Ellen, would you like to introduce yourself and just say a bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Mary Ellen, and
I think we've got internet glitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to you, Kate, and to give some introduction, and then hopefully we'll get back to Mary Ellen.
No problem. Hi everyone, I'm Kate Belmonte. I'm from Medway Green Party, and I'm kind of in the early stages of my political journey. I only really got involved in 2019 during the local elections here in Medway, and I'm a self-employed graphic designer, I have 2 children, but I also have a disease that won't go away, but does get better and get worse. So I'm up and down. So I feel a little bit of a cheat being here, in so much as I don't have anywhere near the background that all the other attendees have. But I'm very keen to do what I can for people like myself and for everyone here in the community. So that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kate. I think what I will do then, given that we're having some technical issues, so we'll just carry on. We've got a question. We'll move on to our questions for Mary Ellen, if it's all right. This is a question on how do disability rights intersect with other social issues and causes, and where is there overlap? And where are there gaps? So maybe I'll put this in the chat if it makes it easier as well for you to see it. So that's a question for Mary Ellen. Or Mary Ellen is here, isn't it? All right, sorry.
Yeah, Mary Ellen. So if we can I suggest that we go to Ellen, then Kate, and maybe at Mary Ellen's question.
Oh, I'll leave it in there. I do apologize. I'll leave it in there and then just actually go to
Let's go to
Kate. Kate, this is a question that, as we said, they were actually provided prior the session. How is disability currently portrayed by the media, and what stories are and are not being told? This is a question for Kate.
I'll make sure I turn my mic on. I think I was thinking about this today, so I've written a bit, and hopefully I won't stick to the script too much. But for me, it depends what media you're consuming and where that publication sits on the political scale. So whether it's left wing, whether it's right wing, whether it's centralised, and we've seen people with disabilities vilified from where I've been sitting. I never used to feel guilty about being disabled, and I have for the last sort of 5-10 years been feeling quite bad about it at times because of the way that we have been portrayed in the media. Specifically, these sensationalist programs to do with benefits and cheats and things like that. I think we do see on TV, I do think we do see disability now. I can't remember as a kid growing up that many people with disabilities, and it was quite big news when it did happen, when they were shown on telly. But now there's quite a lot of different programs and films and documentaries. Obviously we had Crip Camp that we've all watched again today, but then there's Adams Pearson's, he did The Ugly Face of Disability Hate Crime. And then there's The Hidden Story of Disabled Britain, a BBC documentary. And disability is being portrayed in comedy as well now. So we've got a lot of really good comedians, Lee Ridley, Rosie Jones, Alex Brooker, Francesca Martinez, but they all kind of the same demographic. They all tend to be, although there are some females in there, they do tend to be white males. So they're not really sort of showing who we are as a community. 1.5 people of working age, that's a big statistic, and I'd like to see more people represented. But we're also seeing it on mainstream TV now, so not just documentaries focusing on disability, but actually on telly. So if you're a gardener, there's a program on on Channel 4 at the moment called The Great Garden Revolution, and one of the presenters, Bruce Kenneth, has a physical disability. And also you've got BBC weather presenter Lucy Martin, who's seen quite often. And obviously if you've got kids like me and you've watched CBeebies a lot, you've got Kerry Burnell who presents there. So we're not 1/5 of people on the telly yet, but we're slowly getting there. So I think it's important to keep fighting. And then part of the question was asking about what's not on TV. So for me, I don't see a lot about the physical pain side of things. Now, not every person with a disability experiences pain, but it is quite a common symptom, especially with long-term conditions like the one that I've got. And it's really quite frustrating. Really big Line of Duty fan, and Steve Arnott was injured in series 4. Now, in the last series, the final series, he was portrayed as, you know, getting towards becoming a junkie because he was taking over-the-counter pain medications, and that was a perfect opportunity to discuss the lack of pain options there are for people like myself who do suffer with chronic pain. You know, I'm 37 and I've tried everything that I can get legally through doctors and homeopathy, and you know, I'm worried about the future. And as a parent, I don't see a lot about parenting. I see various documentaries and some dramas looking at parenting a child with disability, but not being a parent yourself who has a disability. So I would like to see more programs about us navigating parenthood, because it's just as hard for us, if not much more so. And sex, we still don't see an awful lot about us having sex, and most of us, if we're into having sex, we are having sex. And Naked Attraction comes to mind, if you've ever seen that. I haven't yet seen, and I don't watch it avidly, but I've not yet seen somebody with disability in that program. So that would be really interesting. And I've mainly covered physical disabilities. So there are obviously lots of disabilities that aren't just physical. I know that people on the spectrum have got quite a few programs to dip into: Scorpion, Big Bang Theory, Touch, if you're a Netflix obsession like I've got. So I'd really like to see more normalized disabilities in TV, so that we're not just something to gawk at.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. What an absolutely good portrayal of what's actually happening, and, you know, what expectations are there for the people living with disabilities, and how broad they are. You know, they're really a broad church. It's not something that you can actually just represent by actually just having one person that has a certain condition. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Lovely to see you back, Mary Ellen. So I don't know if I actually should do this question, or are you happy to do it, Dzai?
Oh, no, you can do it, Mary Ellen. Could you just put it back in the chat so that Mary Ellen can see it?
Yeah,
for everybody. Mary Ellen, you did kind of get lost, so just if you can give a little quick bio of yourself, and then in the chat the question was, how do disability rights intersect with other social issues and causes? Where is there overlap, and where are there gaps?
Okay. Hello. Yeah, sorry. My computer crashed, so I had to log back in. But yeah, I'm Mary Ellen, and I've been campaigning and activist for since 2010, supporting DPAC, but since before that, since I became disabled in '94, really, and I don't know if any of you know Penny Kemp from the Green Party, and she died on Saturday, and I'm just in pieces at the moment, so I'm trying to hold it together. And I have to admit, I haven't seen the film, and I apologize, but I'll give it my best shot and try and answer the question as best I can, because I see all the different what's it called, causes as petals of the same daisy, and so I campaign on lots of different fronts. So it's a good question. And so how do disability rights intersect with other social issues and causes? This is a really important question, particularly with the climate crisis and the focus on the climate crisis. I think one of the most important issues is that we realize that we wouldn't have a climate crisis if we had social justice, if we had equality. And it's that inequality that is driving the climate crisis and all the other inequality, all the other issues, and sorry, I'm really struggling. So if we just deal with the climate crisis, where we're ignoring we're dealing with the symptom rather than the cause, and the disability rights is something that the climate and environmentalist movements really need to take on board, because whether it's austerity, whether it's the cuts, whether it's the climate, whether it's flooding, whether there's fires, the people who get hit first and hardest are disabled people from whichever community, whether we're in the global south, whether we're in the affluent west, it doesn't matter where. It's always the disabled people and disabled communities that get hit first and hardest. So disabled rights intersecting with these issues is absolutely vital, that we get this message across to all the different, to the Green Party and to Extinction Rebellion and in all the other movements. We need to get them to understand that the intersectionality of it all, makes disabled people go down to the bottom of the heap when it comes to even having us, giving us the voice, giving us the platforms, supporting thing, and listening to what disabled people's concerns are. So it's not so much even that there's an overlap between the issues. They are all the same issue. It all comes down to inequality, and we need to, and the divisions that are deliberately caused to create that inequality. This starts with sexism and disableism, and racism, and if you happen to be a woman, if you happen to be disabled, if you happen to be the wrong color, the from the wrong part of the world, what thing, all these that build up and just make it harder and harder and harder for an individual to get their rights met. And I'm sorry, I'm just rambling, and I'm
no, absolutely acceptable, and thank you so much really for putting forth such very strong points across that actually the spectrum of equality across the board, and we really send you our hugs and really feel very strongly about the passing of Penny Kemp and her family, with sending them, love and light at this time that is actually quite difficult.
I want to add one more thing.
Yes.
It was Penny who used to run the Speakers Forum at Glastonbury Festival, and when austerity hit and people started dying, and I started to get really very, very concerned about it, and as did everyone else who was joining DPAC and supporting DPAC. And it was Penny who invited me to be a speaker at the Speakers Forum at Glastonbury Festival. And from there, I've been speaking at the Glastonbury Festival and the Green Gathering and other venues, and for DPAC. And I've been taking my art installations to try and get these messages across as well to the different venues. And it's all thanks to Penny. So she was an amazing woman, and she was instrumental in setting up the Green Party, and getting so much that we just take for granted today is down to her. And yeah, please pray for her. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. A really, really an important a key figure in the Green movement. And thank you for putting forward her input and her strong work that actually follows her behind. Thank you so much. So I'll put the next question. Is it my turn? Sorry. To Ellen. So what is the future of the disability rights movement? What are the major issues today and looking ahead? So what do you see as the future of disability rights movement, and what are the major issues today looking ahead?
Thanks, Claudine. That's a fairly huge question.
Apologies.
To start with, though, I think something that one of the co-founders of DPAC, Stephen Lee Hodgkins, said to me last year was he thinks it's more appropriate actually to talk about disabled people movements in the plural than in the singular. And I think I do agree with him in that there are lots of different groups of campaigners who may not have met before, but all doing things. And I think it does take all of us to make the kind of change we want to happen. But historically, what we think of as the disabled people's movement in the UK is what grew out of the union of physically, I always get it's UPS, Union of Physically Impaired Against Segregation. And so that they kind of grew up from a letter that the founder Paul Hunt famously sent to The Guardian in 1972, wanting to link up with other people who, like him, saw disability as a form of oppression. And that led to the forming of UPS. The people involved in that group were all with physical impairments, and they were fighting to get out of segregated services, where not only were they kept away from the rest of society, they were also kept away from people with other impairments. And so historically, what we think of it as the disabled people's movement and what grew out of that tended to be dominated by people with physical impairments. They went on, they founded the independent living movement, which led to centres for independent living, disabled people's organisations across the country. And of course, the social model of disability, which I've seen Vin has posted about in the chat, came out of that. But that particular movement wasn't that accessible historically. So separate movements grew up for self-advocates with learning difficulties, for mental health and psychiatric survivors, for autistic people and for deaf people. So there was a kind of a plurality of movements. But what unites us all is, or potentially unites us all, is the social model of disability, which draws a distinction between the different impairments and illnesses and differences that people may have, and disability, which is understood according to the social model as the layer of oppression that's imposed on us on top of our impairments and illnesses by a society that excludes and marginalizes us. So it's disability is a socially created oppression. So that has the potential to bring a wide range of people with different impairments and experiences together under this shared identity in order to campaign on issues that apply to all of us, such as, for example, inadequate levels of benefits. And since 2010, what I have seen, having been around in the disability sector for a while, was actually a new wave of activism that was more inclusive than what we had before. I was really struck by Crip Camp and how that camp was very inclusive of lots of different impairments and illnesses, but that isn't really how the movement came about in this country, for, like I say, the reasons of those segregated services that people were put into. But I've really enjoyed, if that's the right way to say, it feels hard to say there was anything positive since 2010, but the way our campaigning has been more inclusive, and partly that's because things like the work capability assessment hit people with invisible impairments first of all. So by nature of that, the activism became more inclusive. However, other divisions then emerged. So there were those of us, our groups and our campaigns, who took a very strong stance against austerity, and there were others that tended more to be sort of charities, the bigger, well-established disability organisations, some of them very much led by disabled people who didn't want to be that political. And so there was a division there. So I think I now see it as, I'm not sure it's desirable to want a or even aspire to a single movement as we used to think of there being in this country. I think where there are shared interests, where we have shared goals, then the more the merrier. Let's all fight on with those. But I would be very worried about trying to create any structures that involved compromising on any of our politics and our political analysis for the kind of change, the kind of fundamental level of change that I believe that we need to see in society in order to end disabled people's oppression. I'm going to quickly just cover the question about the challenges. So I think the biggest challenges ahead for us, well, there's so many, because all of the cuts, all of the regressions since 2010, they're all going to have to be reversed before we can start looking ahead to make progress again. And they've affected every area of disabled people's lives. We've got the continuing cuts to social care. We've got inadequate benefit levels and poverty. Disabled people are 3 times more likely to live in severe material deprivation than other people. We have a government who has complete disregard for deaf and disabled people. We seem just to be to them a hindrance that gets in the way of their economic agenda. And then we have an issue which Dzaier mentioned, Jane Campbell, something that she's very concerned about at the moment is a new legislation that's coming through the House of Lords looking to legalise assisted suicide. And that's an extremely big campaign, big issue. And Jane, among other disabled people's organisations, will be campaigning on that. And more information about that can be found on the Not Dead Yet website. But many disabled people's organisations certainly see that as one of the most frightening things that's happening at the moment. That with those increasing barriers and decrease in living standards, what that means is it's also making it more and more difficult for disabled people to mobilise, to get out, to do the kind of resistance that we need to make our issues visible, and to fight for change. So I think key things we need to build on are a louder voice and allies, because we can't do this on our own. It's a fundamental change that we need in society. So I think those are the key challenges for us in the future. Thank you.
Fantastic, and thank you so much, Ellen, for really putting forward quite important things that are actually currently happening. And I might add the COVID Act, which has been really curtailed huge swathes of rights. I mean, not only for disabled people, but rights across the spectrum, but actually the most impacted are the disabled people. And I am not sure how many times this assisted suicide will be brought to the houses of Parliament, or the House of Commons, to actually be debated over and over again, despite it failing multiple times. I think it's absolutely boring to actually even have the opportunity to have that discussed again. I think it's actually such an important thing that there's already again a campaign. We'll put some links in there when we have the opportunity, so that people can actually really start actually looking at that and supporting. Thank you so much. Passing over to Dzaier.
Thank you, Claudine. Okay, so the next section of questions is deeper understanding. And Kate, I'll come to you. And your question is, what kind of disability culture and diversity did you see depicted in Crip Camp? How do you think this is reflected in British culture?
So I think we'd all agree, hope, that it was a beautiful documentary on so many levels. What really struck me was something that Ellen picked up on a second ago, is about the level of acceptance and respect, regardless of what a person's disability was or was not, because the counsellors obviously were there and they didn't all have a form of a disability. So through the movie, I think we sense their empowerment, and how that led to taking on the normal world. And when they did the sit-in, I was in absolute awe of it. It was amazing. The creation of the Centre for Independent Living, that obviously came off of it, off of the initial camps, and it was really poignant to see a group of people who were so separated and isolated from the main general society, but then they were able to come together and work out how to live together and how to get everything done that they needed. So they had that complete independence, to live like an adult, like we all live. And I think probably before that movement, and I don't know a lot about the history, but I hasten to guess that wasn't ever, it must have been a first, certainly in sort of a westernized world where, you know, people have come from being cared for by their parents, if they were lucky enough to be at home and not in the terrible institutions that we witnessed, which I'm sure had most of you, if not crying, but definitely welling up. So to have somewhere that they could live safely in society, away from their family homes, that the culture of the camps brought about was amazing. And can it be reflected in British culture? And I'm not sure on this, because I genuinely don't know the full history. But I think if you're someone who is confident and outgoing and stubborn and knows what they want and wants to get it, then yes, you can find that independence. But not everyone has those personality traits, so it's not something that you should have to fight for. And I think that there is still a massive element of that going on in the UK, where people are fighting. You know, they're going to tribunals, and we know the tribunals are being won by them. So you've got to question, why are the government putting through human beings through this extremely degrading system to just get, you know, 600, I think it's £600 a month, the PIP. So, you know, if you look at the amount of money they spend, I'm sure Ellen said this the last time we were talking, that the actual cost to run the tribunals is more than the cost of it just going through and doing them properly and giving people what they actually deserve. So I don't know if that culture exists in generalized form in the UK. I think there are definitely movements like DPAC where people are fighting and saying that we are humans and we deserve to be treated with respect and have the things that we need to live. But British culture is quite complex, I think. It's hard to define. And we're a very diverse country, which is fantastic. But a lot of people are tied to their political beliefs. And people say, oh, I don't want to get into politics, but it is all politics. And when, you know, you read certain papers and watch certain channels, you know, you're going to have those prejudices reinforced over and over again. And it's the same with race and how people, you know, have got inbuilt racism. We all do. I do. I'm sure I've got inbuilt ableist inside me. So you've always got to question, you know, where you're coming from. And I don't think that we have a culture yet that says it's okay if you feel like that, but you have to analyze why you feel like that and then see why that's wrong and then move forward. If we could lean forward with as much as we can with engaging people who are on the spectrum, or they have a physical disability, or, you know, any other form, then I think that the culture would improve drastically.
Thank you. Mary Ellen, your question is? how have the actions of disability community, disability activists changed the way we all live?
I'm just looking at the question again.
Oh, sorry, I'll put it in the chat for you if that helps. I'm sorry, Mariella. There we go. Sorry. I can read it for you again, Mary Ellen, if it's all right.
Yeah, please. Okay. I'm trying to find it. Sorry.
Don't worry. How have the actions of the disability community or disability activists changed the ways we all live? So,
oh, one of the key ways our disability activists have changed things is just our activism in itself. Long before Extinction Rebellion was blocking roads and blocking bridges, DPAC was there blocking roads and blocking bridges and campaigning inside, right inside of Parliament. So disabled people and disabled activism has been at the forefront of addressing austerity and the cuts, and that is changing, not just for human rights violations, addressing violations by this government for disabled people, but has brought it into the forefront. We've now got the Good Law Project, we've now got Every Doctor, we've got Extinction Rebellion, and movements that are taking on board the fact that this government is corrupt, is breaking the law, is breaching human rights, and it's disabled people who were at the forefront of bringing that to the public's notice. And so to me, disabled activism is so much more than just changing the physical environments and things that which automatically are, because when doors open for disabled people, having doors open automatically when people approach them is beneficial for everybody, not just disabled people, for example. But it's in the actual activism to fight for these things. I think that's where our strength is, and that's where the power of change comes into its own. And I'm really proud of the disabled activist movement, and the changes that are coming about to actually force not just the governments but the community at large to actually look at the inequality that exists, and to address that inequality, and to not shy away from it, not to pretend that it doesn't exist, not to allow it to be pushed under the carpet, but to lift that carpet and deal with that. And I think that's impacts on the whole of the community and the whole of the world when we do that.
Fantastic. And thank you so much. Just actually looking at the questions, I think we've got quite a lot of questions on the Q&A. I think maybe we can try and actually address a few of those on to them, to our panel, if you want. There's a few questions on, I mean, Tola Evans, is there anything similar for disabled people in Britain? Is there anything similar still taking place in the US? I have only seen half the documentary so far. Well, Tola Evans, I think we'd advise you to actually go and look at that. I mean, absolutely amazing, the movement of actually making those huge steps of actually protecting rights for disabled people and having them being treated as human beings. And I think actually in this country, there were similar issues around institutionalization of disabled people, although I'm not sort of conversant with all the DPAC and others, and there's been some responses on the chats on people that actually have been involved in that. And thank you so much. Is there anyone that actually just wants to address Tola Evans' question?
I can have a go.
Oh, fantastic! Yes, thank you, Ellen.
Is there anything similar here, and is it still happening in the US? So in the US, there's an activist group called ADAPT, and they are most famous for something called the Capital Crawl, and I can't remember if that's in Crip Camp or not. Is it where the activists get out of their wheelchairs and they literally crawled up the steps, and that's what achieved the civil rights legislation? Yeah, I'm so familiar, I couldn't remember if it is in that. And I mean, that was a brilliant piece of activism, and because ADAPT have kept going, they've been a continual presence. When Bill Clinton tried to cut welfare benefits for disabled people, and he realized that groups like ADAPT were unhappy, he's supposed to have remarked, "Oh hell, I don't want a group of Crips chained outside the White House," or "I don't want to wake up to a group of cripples chained outside the White House." And that particular cut, I mean, he did under Clinton, there were some there were cuts to welfare benefits that kind of prefigured what happened here, actually, but this particular one he didn't do, and that's because he was put off by the disabled people's activism there, which is a great reminder of how we have to stay vigilant and keep going. And in the UK, we had the Direct Action Network, which preceded Disabled People Against Cuts, and they did a similar thing, so that when Tony Blair was first elected, they were going to they had some planned welfare reforms. We know reforms mean cuts, but Direct Action Network went and threw red paint at the door of Downing Street, and that's what led to the gates now being there. And they actually stopped and didn't carry out that particular cut. What they actually did is went away and thought about how to do it, and fostered a narrative of benefits grounding and malingering, which meant that welfare reform then became possible towards the end of the New Labour years, merging with when the coalition, of course, came through. And sadly, in 2010, disabled people's organisations we got so used to sitting around the table, doing engagement with New Labour that we know now was fairly empty. That a lot of people have just forgotten to campaign. Organisations have become less radical. They've become involved in service delivery and kind of tendering processes. The kind of people running those organisations were people who think about business strategies rather than direct action. So that's why DPAC was set up, to kind of relearn all the things that we'd forgotten, and that Mary Ellen's talked about, is that kind of radical campaigning edge. So I mean, there are other groups like Mental Health Resistance Network and Black Triangle in Scotland and Winvisible. We kind of work together when we do the direct actions, but we're still going. And Claudine reminded me the last time I saw her was an attempt to try and occupy the grounds of Westminster Abbey and set up an accessible camp there. That didn't actually work that day, and the police unfortunately were already in London for Pride, and so we were a group of like 60 of us suddenly became surrounded by 300 police officers standing on our tents, so we weren't allowed to erect them. But really, this is the only way that we find that we can get attention for our issues, because we can't mobilize en masse because of all the barriers that we face to just leaving the front door. So it's very difficult to kind of get attention for our issues. Also, what everyone else has said about the attitudes towards disabled people, and what Kate was saying about the reality of disabled people's lives not being represented anywhere. The public has a vastly skewed idea of what our lives are like. So that's kind of why we need disabled activists, in that we have to be there to be shouting and showing what's happening to us. Otherwise, it just wouldn't get picked up. So it can be difficult. I think one of the many issues that disabled people's campaigns face is early burnout and premature death, because of many issues, including unequal access to healthcare. So the challenges are great, but we really, if we stop fighting, then we become invisible almost immediately, and we just can't afford to let that happen.
Fantastic
Thank you.
response. Thank you. Give that to Dzai. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we're sadly, fastly running out of time. And so one of the things I'd like to do is just ask the question to each of you for you to answer is, what is your vision of utopia? Where do we go next? And how do we get there? I'd also like to kind of maybe add into that is in terms of intersectionality, because we have added a little bit in terms of different groups of people, and we're doing a joint event with Greens of Colour, and I know as a person of colour that it's actually, my disability is a double whammy, because that there may be issues within my own cultures as well. So it would be lovely if you could kind of bring that in as well. That just would be a really, really good thing to say. I'll start. I'm going to start with that, just the general. We've actually only got 3 minutes, but maybe we can go a little bit over. I'll start with you, Mary Ellen, and then I'll quickly go on to Kate, and then we'll finish with you, Ellen, if that's okay with the three of you.
Thanks, Dzai. My vision of utopia is where we don't have to fight for equality, where we don't have to fight for disabled access, where every new build is accessible, that there isn't just a select number of flats or houses that are made accessible, forgetting that disabled people might want to visit their neighbors, and their homes are inaccessible. Just that blinkered thinking of just, we've provided you with an accessible home or an accessible thing, and you just have to be happy with that. Whereas we need to have a society where everywhere is accessible, and not just a select few, and where people don't have to move home just because they become disabled, or and where people aren't being ethnically cleansed from places, or the social cleansing that's taking place in London, for example, and where every life is valued, and not just human lives, but all lives, and just having equality. And how do we get there? And that's a really important and incredible question. And I think how we get there is unity, because where we've got to is built on division, and through that division, the acceptance of inequality, and the othering, and the looking at who's more worthy of support and help than somebody else, whereas it should be all of us are, everybody's needs are being met. And so I think the way forward is to develop unity between all the different causes between Black Lives Matter, between the disability organizations, between the parties as well, because the party politics of left and right, green, socialist, whatever, it's each one fighting their corner, forgetting allows that imbalance to occur, and whereas really we need politics to be serving all of us, and it shouldn't be about left or right, about communism or socialism, or fascism. It's about the whole, about all, and realizing that we're all part of the same, that we're all one. Actually, we're all part of the earth. And when we fight for the earth, we're fighting for ourselves, and we're fighting for all of life on it. So yeah, I think unity is and love is the way forward, instead of division and hate.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Can we just probably try and get Ellen and Kate to say quickly their closing statements on the utopia part?
I second everything that Mary Ellen's just said. I think for me, utopia means getting rid of capitalism, because it is destroying us, it's destroying the planet. We all know this, yet we all play the game. And it is an ideology. So when somebody says to you about your ideology, remind them that capitalism in itself is an ideology, and one that clearly doesn't work, because we wouldn't be needing all of the support of social welfare if it worked properly, which doesn't. I think access is right in terms of obviously physical access, but also being able to access democracy remotely. So throughout lockdown, I've been able to be in Zoom meetings. Never would have happened before. I just wouldn't have been going to meetings if I hadn't been well enough to get out in the chair. So for me, my utopia would be able to access everyone, regardless of where they are in the world, through a computer, which is nice and simple and easy to do with COVID. But before that, they couldn't possibly do that because it was too expensive. Right to be pain-free. Someone in the Q&A was talking about cannabis. The UK is the largest exporter of medical cannabis in the world, yet we still cannot get prescriptions where I am in Kent for chronic pain. And fixing our NHS, it's vital to not just people with disabilities, but for all of us. So if we can stop it being privatised slowly, and have a little bit of ethics back in our politics, and people that you trust, you know, they say something, you trust what they're saying, you know they're not lying, and they aren't going to delete messages automatically like they're saying that they'll be able to do now. Because if you have respect and you have trust and you have a society where everyone is equal, and you know we can achieve things individually or together in groups, then in general everything becomes a lot cheaper, because people aren't, you know, needing the mental health support that our system is currently letting a lot of people down on. Our well-being is better, our education levels are better. We can work our way through AI, which is going to destroy a lot of the low-paid jobs, already is. So for me, utopia is about us all working together. And you're right, regardless of where we do sit on the political spectrum, everyone has got fantastic things to say. Some of us, even myself, some things that I say are ludicrous, but without talking to people from the other side of the table, we don't come to common ground. So for me, that's my utopia.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Ellen,
so my utopia would be one that was run according to the principle of from each according to ability to each according to need, where diversity, difference and interdependence would be welcomed and celebrated. So moving fully away from the ideology of individualism that dominates under capitalism, and where we're taught that people are naturally selfish, because that's absolutely not true. The majority of us care about each other, and we believe in social justice. How do we get there? That's perhaps the more difficult bit. I don't know if we'll see that utopia in my lifetime, and that's if there's still a planet to exist beyond that. But I think that we just have to carry on fighting because we have no choice, especially as things become more desperate. I think it's important that people come to realize their own agency, the power that each person does have, but more than that, the power of collective struggle when, as Mary Ellen and Kate said, when we unite. I think solidarity between different groups is amazingly important, and when we struggle alongside each other, when we show solidarity to other groups, and we can, I think, more successfully learn about living together, being together, understanding different people's perspectives, and being fully inclusive of all different groups and intersections. I think the most powerful way to do that is when we campaign alongside each other, when we're on picket lines or protests together. I think then we get a real desire to want to understand each other and to fight for each other. So yeah, I think solidarity and unity, which is what everyone else has pretty much said.
Fantastic. I will give the last word to Dzaier, and thank you so much for coming over here and gracing us with your presence, our lovely panel. And we do apologize for not having been able to actually answer all the questions in the Q&A, but we'll try and save them actually and post them somewhere so we can actually get some answers to you guys. And passing on to Dzaier to actually do a closing.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for coming, and really to thank our guests for coming to speak to us on the issues of disability. I actually wanted to answer my view as a disabled member of the Green Party in terms of my utopia. And I'd also like to finish with Claudine, you giving your view of that question on utopia, and we'll finish on that. My utopia would be that we, certainly within the Green Party, and I know that it's reflected in other political parties and other organisations across the country. My utopia was that that all of the organisations and our liberation groups actually look at disability when they're actually discussing their own issues, and how disabilities affect, disabled members within their groups, that how discrimination is affecting their disabled members, and actually wanting them to actually change those discriminations. And that we, as all of groups, that we actually work together. So there is the unity bit in it. And I certainly, for me, it's up the revolution and out there, and we should be really going out. We have to go back out on the streets again. Whether that's just as disabled people, I would hope that it's not, and that we've got allies and that will come out, in full strength with us. But for me, that the only way that we can actually force change is to actually go out on the streets and get the British society to actually take what's happening to us as a group, and we are a large minority as a group, and take it seriously and want change in the same way that we want change. So I move on to you, and again, thank you all for coming. I'm sorry we've run over. I hope you've really found this evening useful, and this isn't the end of the story. I can assure you, as the convener of the disability group, this isn't the end of the story in terms of pushing the issues of disability within the party and outside of the party.
Oh, thank you so much, Dzaier. My utopia really is accessibility and having equity. If you actually have equitable access, then you are giving people according to their needs. So that is actually quite a model that I like to see modeled everywhere, to ensure that actually we really redress the injustices of the past. I come from kind of a legal underpinning. So I'm always looking at actually what have we achieved in the past? What are the convention rights saying on disability? Why are we actually sort of failing to enforce anything that this government has signed up to? I would like a public inquiry. so that then we can actually ensure that this never happens again. I would never want to see this COVID Act. I know lots of people would actually be rolling. There are lots of politicians that actually will be rolling off when these comes in. So when we actually look at what actually has transpired over the last 18 months, it is absolutely shameful as a country. And I hope more parties are really taking an active part to ensure that actually we are protecting rights that have actually been upheld in the past. All of a sudden, when we actually have an epidemic for some reason, we seem to actually think the first people that we have to actually sort of disadvantage, or what I would call genocide. It's absolutely a pivotal word to say this. I don't say it lightly, but I think actually there are elements here that actually are indicating that. And I would not be surprised to see a tribunal similar to the ones we've actually had around those times, where we are actually addressing how did we get so far by actually reversing and not protecting people that are most vulnerable. And it's the vulnerable amongst us that really gets hit the hardest when we are actually facing challenges like this. And I really like more allies to support the work that's been done around in our party. And I thank the members for actually passing a policy at our not this last conference, obviously, but the previous one. And I think actually we need to actually be allies that are actually pushing for this to actually be recognized everywhere within the party, in the wider public. And I actually share your views that actually it's time to be on the streets. We will have to say no, physically there, to say it's no longer acceptable to do these things. And I will be there with you and standing up as we did in 2010, 11, and so forth. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for really gracing us with your presence this evening. Beautiful summer evening for the UK. Don't know how long it will last.
Can I, sorry, just before we go, I've seen in the chat that somebody was asking how they can get in touch to become more active. Certainly in the Green Party, if they email the disability, the Disability Green Party email address, I certainly will pick that up, and then we can go on from there.
Fantastic.
So it's a disability group at greenparty.org.uk.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think actually Green Spaces will have most of the groups that actually can be involved in, can have the information on there. Thank you, everybody. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you to our panel.
Yes.
Namaste. Namaste.
Thank you so much.